The Texans just lost to the Broncos 38-24. And the final score is very generous. The reality, 38-24 is not how the game went. The reality is that the game was far more, it wasn't even that close. The game was not as close as 38-24 would suggest. The score was 31-3 at halftime. 31-3. The Texans got kind of their butts kicked a little bit. Now, my initial reaction when I saw the final score and the scores throughout the day, I had a lot of empathy for Houston Texans fans. I said, man, Houston Texans fans for a long time have been calling for Bill O'Brien, the head coach's job. They said, Bill O'Brien wins enough, but he's not good enough. We got to fire him, get rid of him. And so I saw this score developing and I said, man, it just looks like he did not get his team ready to play. Well, maybe the problem is Bill O'Brien just can't get his team to play consistently enough. And I was like, okay, I bought into the narrative very briefly. I said, okay, let's hear it out. Let's go watch the game. And, maybe there's an argument. Maybe the Texans just fell flat on their face and maybe they weren't ready to play. But actually, I watched the game and that wasn't the case. It wasn't like the Texans just were not ready to play. Here's what happened. I learned a lot about the Texans. There's one moment that I think you can talk about in this game where Bill O'Brien made a bad decision. Like in a game time, moment-to-moment decision, he made a misstep. And I acknowledge that. That's not great. That's a mistake. You can't have it. Now, for the record, Bill Belichick also made a mistake on Sunday. Like a coach that makes an occasional mistake, and maybe it's not occasional for Bill O'Brien or not, but I will say there was a point in the second quarter, it was 4th and 1. Now, the Texans were losing 24-3. They were down 21 points, but they had the ball on their own 34-yard line on 4th and 1. They went for it, and they didn't get it, which allowed the Broncos to go ahead and score another touchdown, which made it 31-3 at halftime. I believe that the Houston Texans should have punted the ball away rather than go for it on 4th and 1 on your own 34-yard line. That seems like a mistake. But I thought that was the only situation where Bill O'Brien mismanaged the game. I really thought that, honestly, the reason why the Broncos lost was not because of Bill O'Brien. The question is, how much of the blame should go on the coaching for that loss to the Denver Broncos? I mean, the Broncos got out to this gigantic lead. What happened? How did this happen? Well, first of all, the Texans fumbled. It was 7-0. The Texans were losing 7-0. Then they fumbled, and the Broncos picked that up and took it for a touchdown. Dagger to the heart. You did nothing wrong. Suddenly it's your coach did nothing wrong. It's now 14-0, and you're getting the ball back. And then throughout the first half of that game, the Broncos were getting a constant pass rush in the face of Deshaun Watson. The Texans could not block on the offensive line at all. They were missing assignments. They could not sustain one-on-one blocks. It was a mess. The fumble wasn't Bill O'Brien's fault. If you want to fault Bill O'Brien for anything, you can say, hey, well, Bill O'Brien, if you want to be mad at him, be mad at Bill O'Brien for not giving Deshaun Watson a better offensive line. I believe he's the guy who makes that call in Houston. He's got to build a better offensive line. Deshaun Watson's running for his life. The offensive line's missing assignments. They cannot finish one-on-one blocks. There's a massive issue in Houston. It's the offensive line. So the O-line was a problem. That's part of why they got down by so much. They couldn't score in the first half because pressure was getting to Deshaun Watson so frequently. Now, why did the Texans give up so many points in the first half? They gave up 31 points in the first half. They were down 31-3 at halftime. In the second half, they cleaned things up a lot. In the second half, the Texans only gave up 7 points. So something changed. Well, first of all, one of the things that changed was that the Denver Broncos changed their approach. They were not trying to put up points in the second half so much as they were trying to burn the clock. They were running the ball, taking their time, just trying to run up the clock a little bit. That's part of it. But the other part of it is that the Texans also made adjustments to Drew Lock on defense. Going into the game, the Houston Texans had no film of Drew Lock. They had one game he'd played, his first ever NFL start, and that's like a very vanilla thing. You can't take away a lot from one game. And the truth is that the Texans, Romeo Crennel, the head coach or the defensive coordinator for the Texans, was talking about he had to go watch Missouri film. He had to go watch Missouri film from Drew Lock in college to go learn about Drew Lock and see what they might do. They said, okay, because Drew Lock did this in college and that worked, maybe we're going to guess that maybe they'll do that in Denver. Denver will do that in Houston against us. A lot of speculation. How do you prepare for a guy you've never seen play before? You don't know what to expect schematically. That really hurt the Houston Texans. Drew Lock is solid, but the Texans had no idea what to prepare for. That's why Denver put up so many points in the first half, at least part of it. Let's look at the Texans season so far. A lot of people want Bill O'Brien, the head coach, fired. Well, okay, the Texans are 8-5. They lead their division. They just beat the Patriots 2 weeks ago. Clearly, like, they're doing something right. You beat the Patriots. I don't care how good or bad the Patriots are. You beat Bill Belichick. That's a sign that you're doing something right. Here are the 5 losses by the Houston Texans this year. They lost to the Saints by 2 points. The New Orleans Saints, the number 2 seed in the entire NFC, a great football team. They might win the Super Bowl this year. They lost to the Saints by 2 points. They also lost to the Panthers by 6. They lost to the Colts by a touchdown. Those are 3 losses, all one-score games. Now, I acknowledge the Texans got buried by the Baltimore Ravens 41-7 earlier this year. Now, the Ravens might be the best team in the NFL. They might win the Super Bowl. I don't know how to defend that. You got destroyed. That's embarrassing and a bad loss. It's just bad. Now they've lost to the Broncos, their 5th loss of the year. They lost 3 games by 1 score. They lost to the Ravens. They got decimated. And then they lost to a solid rookie quarterback that they had no film of whatsoever. Those 5 losses are not as bad when you look at what's really happened. 3 losses by 1 score. Now, I can't defend the Ravens game. That's just embarrassing. And you can explain away what happened against the Broncos. So I wouldn't fire Bill O'Brien. He's not a bad head coach. The things you need to do to be a good head coach. He's great with X's and O's. I think people do fear him. I think people respect him in that locker room. I think that he is well organized enough. And he's not a great decision maker. Like maybe the third thing you need to be a head coach, which is you got to have high velocity thinking. He's not a great guy with high velocity thinking. He screws up in-game decisions from time to time. But overall, his decision making is good. If he nails 4 of the 5 things you need to be a great head coach, he's good enough in my opinion. And I would not fire Bill O'Brien as the Houston Texans head coach. I think he's good enough. I really believe that. I stand by that. Bill O'Brien's a good enough guy. I would keep him as the Texans head coach. I would not fire him in Houston.